For 99.9% of human history, we were prey. For millions of years, our ancestors lived in constant fear, hunted by predators they could not fight. They were not pioneers. They were another species of animal trying to survive on a hostile planet. But a series of 3 triggers ignited a revolution, transforming a creature that hid in the dark into a being that would build empires and walk on the moon. The journey from animal to human did not begin with a sudden leap, but with the sharp edge of a broken stone. This is the story of how we became what we are. How does an animal without fangs or claws survive a world of giant hyenas and saber-toothed cats? 3.3 million years ago, our ancestors were on the verge of extinction. They were small, slow, and defenseless. A single misstep was a death sentence. Then, on the shores of Lake Turkana in Kenya, a hominin, possibly an Australopithecus, did something new. It picked up a stone and intentionally struck it with another, executing a plan to create a sharp edge. The result was the Lomekwi toolkit, the oldest known manufactured objects on Earth. The makers of these tools may not have belonged to our genus Homo, but to Australopithecus, or possibly Kenyanthropus. This distinct Lomekwian technology came hundreds of thousands of years before the Oldowan tradition and marks a separate step in our technological evolution. This was not just tool use, it was the birth of technology. For the next 700,000 years, this technology barely advanced. Then, around 2.6 million years ago, the Oldowan toolkit appeared. The Oldowan tools represented a clear leap forward, but appeared nearly 500,000 years after the earliest Lomekwian stones. These were lighter, more precise stone flakes, created by a new species, Homo habilis, the handyman. These tools gave them a critical advantage. For the first time, they could slice through tough animal hides to butcher carcasses left by other predators. They could use hammerstones to crack open bones and access the nutrient-rich marrow inside. This new diet, rich in calories and protein, fueled the growth of the most energy-demanding organ in the body, the brain. As their brains grew, their tools evolved. By 1.76 million years ago, a new design appeared, the Acheulean hand axe. Symmetrical, teardrop-shaped, and found across Africa, Asia, and Europe, the hand axe was not just a tool, it was a concept. To create one required foresight, a multi-step process, and a mental template that could be taught and passed down. It was the first evidence of a shared culture, a design connecting minds across generations. This sharpened stone did not just cut meat. It rewired the brain, transformed the diet, and laid the foundation for cooperation. But with a bigger brain and a better tool, where would our ancestors go next? Bigger brains and better tools led to a new boldness. Nearly 2 million years ago, Homo erectus, a species that stood fully upright, began to walk out of Africa. This was the first great human migration, a slow expansion into the vast, unknown continents of Asia and Europe. But this new world presented new dangers. Our ancestors faced freezing climates, unfamiliar predators, and nights that brought absolute darkness. A sudden blizzard or a predator with night vision could annihilate an entire group. To survive, they needed to conquer the environment itself. The key was the second trigger: fire. The earliest conclusive evidence for the control of fire dates back at least 800,000 years at sites in Israel. However, not all scientists agree on these early dates. Some believe the widespread and regular use of fire by humans is only clearly proven after about 400,000 years ago. with the best evidence found at sites like Qesem Cave, also in Israel. The story of fire may be even more complex and debated than we once thought. It was a revolutionary weapon and tool. Fire provided warmth against the cold of Ice Age winters, allowing humans to survive in previously uninhabitable regions. It created a protective barrier of light and heat that kept predators at bay. A cave lion or a pack of hyenas would halt at the edge of a campfire. It turned the night from a time of terror into a time of security. Its most transformative power, however, was cooking. Heating food pre-digests it, breaking down tough proteins and neutralizing toxins. This unlocked a massive surplus of calories, energy that was diverted from the gut to fuel an even larger, more complex brain. Fire also changed the structure of our lives. It extended the day, creating social time after sunset. Around the hearth, our ancestors gathered. They repaired tools, planned hunts, and reinforced social bonds. The campfire was the first community center, the place where culture was forged. Armed with fire and improved hunting weapons like spears, groups of hominins became apex predators capable of taking down large game. They were no longer just surviving in the world, they were beginning to shape it. They had mastered stone and flame. What would they master next? For millions of years, evolution had shaped our bodies. But around 300,000 years ago, with the arrival of our own species, Homo sapiens, the greatest revolution began, this time on the inside. The hardware was in place, a large brain housed in a modern skull. Now, the software was booting up. This was the third trigger, the birth of the symbolic mind. We know this not from fossils, but from the artifacts our ancestors left behind, objects that served no practical purpose for survival. The first sign was how they treated their dead. Around 100,000 years ago, we see clear evidence of intentional burials. In places like the Skul and Kafse caves in Israel, bodies were placed in graves, sometimes with offerings like deer antlers or boar jawbones. Before this, a dead relative was left to be consumed by scavengers. Burial signifies a monumental cognitive leap. It proves an awareness of mortality, a sense of grief and respect, and the first abstract questions about life and death. Then came art. Across the globe, from Spain to Indonesia, our ancestors began to project their inner worlds onto cave walls. They painted bison and horses and stenciled their own hands, a declaration across time that said, "I was here." In Blombos Cave in South Africa, they engraved geometric patterns on pieces of ochre more than 75,000 years ago. Alongside these engravings, our ancestors crafted beads and ornaments from ochre and shells, some dating back nearly 100,000 years. These early personal adornments are the first proof of symbolic identity and complex social life. This was not about hunting or fighting. This was about meaning. This symbolic thinking was reflected in their technology. Tools became complex composite objects. They attached finely crafted stone points to shafts to create spears and arrows, and carved bone into barbed harpoons. This required abstract thought and planning. The invisible tool holding all this together was complex language. While words do not fossilize, the existence of ritual, art, and composite tools is impossible without it. Language allows for the sharing of ideas, the coordination of complex hunts, and the construction of a shared culture. It lets us speak of the past, plan for the future, and imagine what is not yet real. Our species was no longer just a clever animal. We were now a creature that buried its dead, created art, and told stories. What happens when such a creature is unleashed upon the world? A sharpened stone, a captured flame, and a mind that could think in symbols. These three triggers launched the improbable story of humanity. They took a vulnerable primate and, over 3 million years, turned it into a species that could walk on the moon. The tool reshaped our bodies and diet. The fire reshaped our environment and our societies. The symbolic mind reshaped reality itself, filling it with art, culture, and endless questions. This ascent was not guaranteed. It was a brutal path, filtered through ice ages, famines, and the constant threat of extinction. For every successful step forward, millions of our ancestors died. Our story is written in the stone, ash, and art they left behind. It is the story of a creature that went from chipping rocks to decoding its own genome. The ascent from animal to human was driven by those first three triggers, and it leaves us with one final question. What will the next trigger be? Have we already set it in motion, or is the next leap still ahead of us? If our story of humanity's long ascent, from prey to planet shaper, inspired you, subscribe for more epic journeys through history. Share your thoughts below. What do you think will shape our future? Keep the legends and our history alive.